Today's video we're going to be looking at 8-bit palletized textures as well as table fog and video cards that can and can't do these effects.
We review all technology from games to all PCs, and don't forget the toys. Don't get ancient electronics. We cover it all.
So first off, let me apologize. Throughout this video, I'm probably going to pronounce it, I believe it's supposed to be 8-bit palleted textures, but I'm probably going to pronounce it several times 8-bit palletized textures. It's something I've been struggling with, and I think I already said it wrong in the intro as I'm looking at it and editing here, but forgive me, I will mispronounce it probably throughout these videos. So that out of the way, okay, so what is this? So I've actually talked about 8-bit palleted textures and fog table before, and usually it's in reference when someone's asking about like they want a really powerful video card in a Windows 98 machine. And usually I say I think don't do anything above the GeForce FX series because 8-bit palleted textures and table fog are sort of like graphic features that some games used in Windows 98, and those were removed at least in the GeForce cards after the FX series. So I have brought it up on this channel before, but I've never really talked about it. So I kind of came across the idea of doing this video when I was trying to put together a different video, which was about taking a second look at my K6 3 Plus machine. I made some changes in that, and I wanted to play a specific game on that machine, and that game does require a card that supports 8-bit palleted textures. And I had a TNT2 Ultra in there, and you know, it has its benefits, but it has its drawbacks too. So I was looking at different video cards to put in there, different options. So of course, in the process of looking at all these different cards, you know, I was looking at cards that supported 8-bit palleted textures and cards that didn't. And I was going to include this all on my, you know, second look at my K6 3 Plus build, but in the end, I decided it kind of deserved its own video because this is a topic that comes up sometimes when we're talking about retro machines. And there were a smaller number of games that not only 8-bit palleted textures, but table fog. These two things seem to go hand in hand because, you know, they stopped supporting them both at the same time, it seems. So I wanted to do kind of my own video on that subject and looking at the different cards that maybe I was considering for my K6 build. So that's what this video is going to be here. So we're going to take a look at just a couple cards that I was considering for that build. We're going to see how well they handle both the 8-bit palleted textures and table fog. So before we do that, let's try to take a look at what these things are, because obviously we want to know what they are. Just keep in mind, I am just a humble computer enthusiast. I'm not an expert. I don't have all the technical details on this stuff. So if you have more to add, please feel free to put it in the comment section. Now, if you go over to the Vogan's website, there's actually a pretty long thread on the topic of table fog and 8-bit palleted textures, and it's very informative. It goes on. There's a lot of screenshots. But if we want to get into what this is, the Vogan's wiki has a page on the 8-bit palleted textures as well as table fog. So we'll do the 8-bit palleted textures first. Now if we look here, the effect summary, it says a palleted texture is defined as giving both a palette of colors and a set of image data, which is composed of indices into the palette. Again, I'm not a technical guy. I have no idea what that means. I just know that it makes things look a certain way. Okay, so for instance, there's two examples here. This is from Final Fantasy VIII, and this is what it's supposed to look like. So this is on a Voodoo 3 2000. So that's what it's supposed to look like. And then here is an example of it on a card that it doesn't support the palleted textures. And as you can see, it looks like really weird here, like the blending. It doesn't look right. It looks like the game, you know, is probably playable. Kind of maybe a minor thing in this instant, but it just does not look right. It just looks like it's blending one shade into another like very poorly. It just looks kind of gross. So we go up here. It does say graphics cards which support palette textures. 3DFX cards, NVIDIA GeForce 256 through FX. So that means our TNT2 Ultra and the TNT line in general does not support paletted texture, 8-bit paletted texture, which isn't good. And the kicker is, when you get to the GeForce 256, you're kind of using different drivers, and you do get into some incompatibility issues where some games start to not display right. Incoming's example I always use. Phil from Phil's Computer Lab has demonstrated this as well. So that's kind of a thing. You probably want to use your TNT2 for better compatibility, but I guess it's not going to have better compatibility if your game uses 8-bit paletted textures. So that's a thing here. S3 Savage 4, so that's good. And then interestingly, the Trident Blade 3D and the 3D Labs Permedia do support it. Graphics cards which don't support it, ATI Radeon cards. Now, Radeon specifically doesn't say anything about ATI Rage series cards, so the Rage 128 actually isn't listed as supporting or not supporting, interestingly. Matrox cards don't support it, GeForce 6 and up series, and the S3 Unichrome Pro. So games that require it, not a big list here. European Air War and Final Fantasy 7 and 8, not a big list. But we do go down here, and there's a little bit bigger list of games that optionally use it. So I believe you can use it in these games, and it might make it look better or run a little faster. It says here certain games can optionally use paletted textures to improve rendering performance, but do not require it. So, these are games that you'd probably be running on a K6 type computer. Or something, from the late 90s. You get GL Quake, Quake 2, Hexen 2, Heretic 2, Tomb Raider 3 Forsay. These are kind of heavy hitters. So, it might be nice to have that optional ability to use the paletted textures. Alright, so conveniently right here we have a link to games with table fog. So that's the second thing we're looking at here. So I click that. And so here is table fog effect summary. Fog, this one's a little bit easier to understand because we all pretty much know what fog is. It's a special effect used to blend a scene into a predefined color to give the impression of fog, to give the impression that fog is present in a scene. Table fog, also called pixel fog, is calculated independent of vertices. Ideally, a fog is calculated on a pixel basis. It can be emulated or can be done through hardware. Alright, so graphics cards which do support table fog. Again, we have our 3DFX card. So far the 3DFX card, according to the Vogan's Wiki, supports both 8-bit paletted texture and table fog. And then here we just have NVIDIA cards. It just doesn't differentiate, just like all NVIDIA cards. All Matrox cards, Power VR cards, and again, here's our S3 Savage 4 card. But it doesn't say anything on ATI here. Okay, cards which do not support table fog. ATI Radeon cards, again, specifically Radeon, does not mention the Rage series ATI cards, so doesn't say anything about the Rage 128. Unichrome and the 3D Labs Permedia 2. So it looks like the Permedia doesn't support table fog, but it does support 8-bit paletted textures. Here we have a little note here. Under Windows 98, partial table fog support on, again, Radeon cards. It can be enabled via registry tweaks. Again, specifically talking about Radeon cards. Here's a quick example of the fog effect. Right here, this is from a 3DFX, so this is proper looking. Looks kind of foggy up there. We got fog up by the tower. And this is without it. This is on a Radeon 9000. With no fog. Still, game seems playable, but you lose kind of that atmosphere without the fog effect. So games that use table fog, again, this is late 90s stuff. Stuff you'd probably be playing on a, like a Pentium 2, Pentium 3, or a high-end Super Socket 7 like a K6 3 Plus or K6 type CPU. Flight Unlimited 2, Shadows of the Empire, Heavy Gear 2, Need for Speed, Star Wars Episode 1, Phantom Menace, Thief 2, Metal Age. So yeah, some heavy hitters there. So table fog could be a important effect you would want your card to be able to support. So first, let's look at these two guys. These are pretty much your first and second choices probably if you're building like a Windows 98 type machine, a late 90s machine, something on Super Socket 7, Pentium 2, Pentium 3. These are probably your two best choices here. So we have the TNT2. This is a TNT2 Ultra specifically, and this is a Voodoo 3. Specifically, this is a Voodoo 3 3000. This is the highest end as far as the TNT line. For the Voodoo line, there is a Voodoo 3500 that's a little bit faster than the Voodoo 3000, but it's pretty hard to come by these days. So I kind of expect good showings from both of these cards. The Voodoo is kind of like our control subject. Basically, this should pass with flying colors. This should be able to do everything. So this should be able to do 8-bit paletted textures as well as table fog with no problem. Unfortunately, the TNT2 card, it does have some advantages. There's disadvantages and advantages. Of course, this guy can do glide. It's very compatible with DOS overall. This guy here, it's a little bit sharper with its textures, images. It's pretty good at DOS as well as far as compatibility goes. And this can do 32-bit color where the Voodoo can't. But when you're running on some machines in the Windows 98 era, certain CPUs, especially if it's maybe like Super Socket 7 or Socket 7, you might really not have the horsepower to run games in 32-bit color. So that's something to keep in mind. Now this guy here should be able to do table fog just fine, but it cannot do 8-bit paletted textures. So that's something that the Voodoo can do, and the TNT2 line apparently cannot do. We will test that though. I also wanted to show you guys with the Voodoo 3 card, you may be interested in the fan on there. This is a really nice solution I found. Although I can't tell you where I got this, it was just in my collection. This, I believe, was mounted on a CPU, a Pentium 4, I believe. And it's this little, so the fan itself is connected to this little plastic thing that has like these tabs. And it just happens that it grips into the heatsink on the Voodoo like really well. Like this is on there like really solid. So I've seen some kind of janky ways that people have connected these fans to the heatsink on the Voodoo 3 because there's really no good way to do it. But this is really, it's kind of big and oversized. I don't know how helpful this is on the Voodoo 3 3000, but this would probably be really helpful on cooling a Voodoo 3 3500. But I've just put it on there, so yeah, I'm glad I had this thing just kind of laying in a box. Or it might have been on like a motherboard that I wasn't using, like I was in a pile of like Pentium 4 boards. But it's really cool, and it's on there like really well, and I can just connect this to the motherboard. So yeah, really nice. Again, all these cards are also around from the same era, like 1999, 2000. So keep that in mind. Next, we have this guy here. This is the Rage 128 Pro. It's got so it's got VGA, S-Video, we've got composite out and composite in. I believe this has pretty good like built-in DVD decoding capabilities. This should be a pretty good card, not as fast as these guys, but it actually should be pretty speedy. I believe, at least from what I've read, that this actually does 32-bit color rendering pretty well, maybe even better than the TNT2 at certain resolutions. So interested in this card. Although, I believe this one, it's kind of the opposite of this guy. I believe this one can do 8-bit paletted textures from the little bit of time I've had with it, but it doesn't do table fog. But we'll see. We'll test that out and see. And finally here we have, this is from number 9. This is the Savage 4. But this one should also be able to do everything. So we'll see. I'm very interested if this guy will pass all our tests for 8-bit paletted textures and table fog. So very interested. But I believe this should be able to do it all. So just a quick little edit here before I start doing testing here. I've decided for the Savage 4 card, I'm going to swap out this number 9 Savage 4 card with the Extreme chip for this guy here. So this is the Diamond Stealth. I think it's the 5. So this is the Diamond Stealth, I think like the S540. So this is also a Savage 4 graphics card. I believe the biggest difference is this one uses the Pro. This one's from Diamond Multimedia, and this is uses the Savage 4 Pro chip. So it's a little bit slower than this one, but otherwise it's identical in you know, its features and what it can do. I believe this one runs at like 166 megahertz, and this is 125. So it's a little bit slower, but for these tests, we don't care about speed of the card. This card does have one advantage over this guy here, and that is it's double the memory. So this guy was 16 megabytes, and this is 32 megabytes. And it's a little more convenient for me. It just has a standard VGA, as opposed to the DVI that I have to use an adapter. Not a big deal, but I think I'm just going to go with this, with the Diamond version of the card here, with double the memory of this one. Like I said, it is slower, but these tests, the speed is really kind of irrelevant. I'll also mention it because I know my viewers are kind of eagle-eyed. If you'll notice right here, jumper, I think this jumper JP2 is missing. I have it, it just fell off. If you'll notice, there's 3 jumpers. One, well, it should be here, there's one here, and then there's one here. As far as I can tell, that's just for your AGP speed. I believe if all 3 are shorted, it goes to AGP times 4. The board I'm using this in is, I don't even think it's capable of times 4 AGP, so it doesn't really matter. All our cards, I believe, are running at times 2 AGP speeds. So even though what I initially said is what sparked the idea for this video was a video card to put my Super Socket 7 AMD K63 Plus machine, I am actually going to be doing all the testing on this guy here. This is a Dell Dimension XPS. It has Windows 98 on it. It has a Pentium 3 450 megahertz CPU and 256 megabytes of SD RAM. So the first card we're going to look at here is kind of our control card. That's the Voodoo 3. Now for the drivers, I'm using the latest reference drivers. I actually do think there's one version of the drivers that's ahead of this, but it's like a beta driver. So I'm actually using the latest official tested reference drivers for this test. So the first game we're going to look at is Final Fantasy VII. When you run its configuration for the demo, it has a sort of, it checks the card to see if your card has the ability to run 8-bit paletted textures. I'm using the original version of the demo because there is a patch that like updates the configure program, but I think it does like a workaround, so it might say passed for the 8-bit paletted textures when your card doesn't support it. So at least that's what I've read. So I'm just going with the original version 1.0 of Final Fantasy VII. I don't actually know what in the game uses 8-bit paletted textures, so I couldn't tell you like what it is in the game that uses that feature, but like I said, the configuration is pretty handy for telling you if your card will pass, has that feature or not. And as we look at our Voodoo 3 card, it does pass without issue. So next we're going to take a look at Final Fantasy VIII. That's going to run largely the same as it did with 7. It does the same kind of check where it checks the video card. And as here we can see it does support 8-bit paletted textures, so the Voodoo 3 passed again. If these games do detect everything, it allows you to play the game in like 3D hardware accelerated mode. So this game, unlike Final Fantasy VII, though, I do know where this game does use 8-bit paletted textures, so we can tell if it's actually working in the game. And that is if you go into the menu, like the configure menu, where you look at your character's status and its stats and all that. If you look at the background and how it blends together, kind of like the gray in the background, if it blends well, it blends well. If your card does not support 8-bit paletted textures, as we've seen earlier in that screenshot, it will look kind of like really bad. So that's one way. I believe there's other ways to tell. I think with some cards you'll have other graphical issues. I don't know 100% if that has to do with 8-bit paletted texture support or lack thereof, but I've seen some screenshots where the actual little bars and text are kind of like garbled or offset if your card doesn't support 8-bit paletted textures. But the quickest and surest way is to just kind of look at the background in the status screen, or when you go down to config where there's less text on the screen, and you can just see the colors just don't blend very well in the background. Of course, it looks kind of fine with our Voodoo 3 card. Well, it does look fine with our Voodoo 3 card. So again, as we expected, it passed without issue. Now the next title we're going to look at here is Forsaken. You saw it running earlier in this video. Now if you go into visuals and you can select texture format, if your card supports 8-bit paletted texture, it will show up here. As we can see with the Voodoo 3, there is an option for 8-bit paletted texture. So that's kind of like a quick way to check your card if you have this game to see if the 8-bit paletted textures is indeed supported. So now let's move over and take a look at table fog support. Shadows of the Empire is a pretty good game to see if your card supports table fog. Now you are going to have to get through like the first mission where you're flying around and you're taking down like AT-ATs and stuff. So in the second mission at the very beginning, you escape from Echo Base. As you see, it's loading now. So at the very beginning here, after this little FMV scene, you're inside the base, and there is a fog effect going on in these scenes. So it's a real quick and easy way to see if your card properly supports table fog. Now the Voodoo 3, 3000, any of the Voodoo 3 should support this effect correctly, and I can see right away that it does look like it is properly supporting the effect. So yeah, you can see there in the background, like way back, it kind of looks, well, foggy. That is how it's supposed to appear. So as you get closer, the fog kind of clears and you can see the wall behind it. So in cards that don't support table fog, you just will see the wall. It won't be foggy, or worst case scenario, there'll be like graphical glitches. But as you can see, it's kind of used a bit heavily here in this stage. And of course, as we knew, the Voodoo 3 is showing the effect correctly and without any issues. Thief 2, the Metal Age. Make sure, well, mine is patched to the latest version. Make sure you go into video and turn weather effects and fogging on and sky detail to high. So there's two effects we're going to check here. One is a fog effect, and one is it might be, there's some debate on if it's actually an 8-bit paletted texture. I think something else might be going on here, but it is an interesting test because some cards can't do it. But in the first stage, there's this sky scene, and there's stars in the sky. And on some cards, the stars are not rendered, or they're not rendered. The sky isn't rendered properly. I was reading Vogan's. A lot of people thought this was an 8-bit paletted texture effect, but I'm not sure it is. There's some debate. The thing is, a lot of games don't actually say if they use 8-bit paletted textures or not. But it still is a neat thing to look at and test, and we're going to test all the cards. And as you can see here, the Voodoo 3 renders it fine. I can see the stars in the sky. I can see the moon with the kind of aura around it, and I can see the kind of the night clouds moving slowly across the sky. So this is being rendered correctly on the Voodoo 3, regardless of what kind of graphical effect is going on here. It looks correct. I think it's also worth saying that since we aren't sure that's actually an 8-bit paletted texture effect going on there, different drivers, if your card isn't rendering the sky properly, different drivers might actually fix that. And I believe some people at Vogan's did show this. Indeed, it was happening. So next, this is a simple test for table fog. I believe this is stage 11, and there's a tower, and you look up at it in the sky, and of course, if rendered correctly, it should be foggy, like you can't see the top of the tower, or you can barely see the top of the tower. Some cards actually render table fog kind of correctly, but it's too heavy. So I believe I've seen screenshots on some cards, like the fog's too heavy and you can't even see the top of the tower. But I think it's supposed to be, as we see here, where it's kind of a lighter fog, and you can make out the top of the tower. It's just sort of partially obscured in the fog. So of course, as we can see here, it is being rendered correctly. So now we're going to take a briefer look at the other three cards. I just wanted to go over all the tests. So next we're going to look at our TNT2, which should not have support for 8-bit palette textures, but should have support for table fog. So we'll look at those tests again a little bit briefer than we did with the Voodoo 3 card. Alright, so now let's take a look at our TNT2 Ultra. I'm using drivers version 45.23 from 2003. They seem to be well-liked drivers for the TNT2 cards for Windows 98. They seem to strike a good balance between like power and compatibility. So those are the drivers I'm going with. I believe there are, of course, newer ones or older ones that you can use if you want. So first we're going to look at Final Fantasy VII. And we don't expect this to work because the card does not support 8-bit paleted textures. And if we look down there, we can see 8-bit paleted textures failed. And it defaults, well, the only option we get is software renderer. Like I said, there is a patch that you can do for this demo, and it will like kind of bypass that and still let you use TNT card, and it will let you use, I believe, the 3D acceleration. But of course, you won't get the 8-bit paleted textures, so I don't know how that will affect gameplay. So now we're going to take a look at Final Fantasy VIII, and as you can see here, it has activated the direct 3D hardware acceleration, but as we can see, 8-bit paleted textures test has failed as expected. So we're going to be able to play the game here, and we're going to be able to see the effect of running this game on a card that does not support 8-bit paleted textures. And here we are in the game. I like to walk around. I like to go in this room just to see if we get any weird effects going on. I've seen some screenshots where certain cards will give weird effects in this room, or graphical glitches. So yeah, we can see right away, looking at this menu here, if you look at the background, it just does not blend as well as it did on the Voodoo 3. It almost looks like, it reminds me of like oil streaks. As you can see there, yeah, it does not look as good as it did on the Voodoo 3. So that's an area where this game does use the 8-bit paleted textures. Of course, this card can't render the effect properly, so we get that weird, almost looks like I said, to me, it kind of looks like oil. Like when you see oil on the ground, light reflects off it, it kind of looks like that. I mean, it obviously doesn't make the game unplayable, but it doesn't really look that nice either. And then again, just to be thorough, let's take a look at Forsaken. We go into visuals, go into textures, and there is no option for 8-bit paleted textures. Now I do see more options for what is that RGBA, the numbers, than we had with the Voodoo 3. I have no idea what any of those mean or how they change the look of the game. No clue, but we do not have an option to pick 8-bit paleted textures. Let's look at Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. Now this should work. We know it supports table fog, but a weird thing I noticed, look at the text and the font. It's different. It's a little hard to read. I have no idea why the font is this way on a TNT2 that I'm using here. It looks kind of cool, but it's a little harder to read. I don't know why the font is looking like that. But that aside, again, the fog effect looks fine. Pretty much looks like it did on the Voodoo 3. So, you know, as we knew, this card renders table fog effect without issue. And then lastly here, taking a look at Thief 2. Again, this card, the TNT2 with these drivers, is rendering the sky correctly. I don't see any issues going on there. I can see the stars clearly, and everything looks good. So now let's see how it handles that fog with the tower. And everything looks good here as well, so no surprises. We did know this card didn't support the 8-bit paleted textures. We did know it supported the table fog. I mean, the only surprise was that weird font look I got in Shadows of the Empire, but other than that, pretty much no surprises. It's rendered what we knew it would, and it didn't render what we knew it didn't. So let's move on to something a little more interesting. So kind of a last-minute entry. I did the TNT2 Ultra, so I figured why not look at the next card in NVIDIA's line, which would have been the GeForce 256. Now, this is GeForce 256 SDR, so this isn't the DDR version, but again, we're not worried about speed here. With the TNT2, of course, we saw it supported table fog, did not support the 8-bit paletted textures. This card supposedly should fix this. This supposedly is NVIDIA's first card to support 8-bit paletted textures. This should also support table fog, so we will see. So I'm going to take a little bit of an aside here before we go into the tests with the GeForce 256, and I just want to talk about, I've mentioned this on my channel before and earlier about the difference with the TNT 2 and when you jump up to a GeForce 256, certain games might have graphical issues on the GeForce 256, which they didn't on the TNT 2. Now, according to Phil over at Phil's Computer Lab, this has something to do with they changed the color key coding in the GeForce 256. I'm not 100% sure what that means, but I'm not a technical expert on that stuff, so I'll just take his word for it. But it does create some issues here, and as far as I can tell, they're not driver related. I tried a bunch of different drivers and I had the same issue, but I just wanted to show that here because it kind of comes up. It might come up later and be relevant, and I do mention it time to time, so I just wanted to show a comparison here with the TNT2 and the GeForce 256 in the game incoming. You will notice on the GeForce 256, the HUD, the heads-up display is just, it's all like kind of broken up. It just doesn't look right, and yeah, you're just going to get graphical glitches for certain older games with the GeForce 256. So of course, first game we're going to look at is Final Fantasy VII. You can already see here it's defaulted to software render, even though it did pass the 8-bit paletted texture. We only get the option for software render. I believe that is a software issue. I think you need the updated patch for Final Fantasy VII to allow the GeForce 256 and a lot of the NVIDIA cards to run in 3D accelerated mode for this game. So I believe it is showing here it passed for 8-bit palette textures, but like I said, I think you need to update to, I think it's the 1.03 version in order to get 3D acceleration when you're using an NVIDIA card. Moving on to Final Fantasy VIII, we can see here that 3D accelerated mode is active, and it did pass the 8-bit paletted textures test. So far everything looks good here. Again, remember the TNT2 did not pass that test. It did not support 8-bit paletted textures. I also want to reiterate, I don't know if I said before, I'm using the exact same drivers with the GeForce as I did with the TNT. So let's take a look at how it actually displays the game. And right away we see graphical issues. We see these lines across. I'm not sure if this is like a driver issue or the game just doesn't play well with the GeForce. I'm not sure, but yeah, there's definitely glitches across there. I don't think that has anything to do with 8-bit paletted textures, though. So let's take a look here at the status screen. As you can see, it's blending pretty well like it did with the Voodoo. So it looks like the 8-bit paletted textures is working correctly in this game, but I don't know why we are getting those lines going across. No idea. It could be any number of reasons, but it does seem like the 8-bit paletted textures is working correctly. And with Forsaken, everything looks good. The 8-bit paletted textures, well, it looks like it actually is spelled there, 8-bit paletized textures. I don't know, maybe both pronunciations are correct. But it does seem to be working here with Forsaken. And it does seem like the game is playing. I didn't see any glitches or anything like that, so it does look like it's displaying and playing Forsaken correctly. Shadows in the Empire, we still get that the text looks kind of weird to me, but other than that, the table fog seems to be displaying correctly. I don't see any issues, so yeah, it looks like it's fine with the table fog in this game. So this is Thief 2, and we have encountered our first card that cannot render the sky correctly for our sky test. If you'll notice, there are no stars in the sky. Now, it looks like the moon and the aura around it and the clouds are working okay. I believe the clouds are slowly moving across the sky as they should. It's hard to tell without the stars for reference, but yes, the stars are missing. Again, I definitely don't think this is 8-bit paletized or 8-bit paletted texture issue because it passed all the previous tests. It definitely seems like this is something else, and it may be a graphical glitch similar to the issue with incoming, where they changed the color keying on some cards, like this GeForce 256, and it just throws some games off. Take note, I did try other drivers. I actually tried the earliest driver from 1999 that supported the GeForce, and I tried the latest driver, I think from like 2005, and I had the same issue. The stars did not display using any of these drivers, so definitely doesn't look like a driver issue. Lastly, let's look at the fog here in Thief 2, and yeah, it displays the fog just fine as we expected. Alright, so let's move on to something kind of interesting. Let's move on to the Rage 128. The Rage 128 Pro. Don't really know what to expect from that card, but let's take a look. Now let's take a look at the Rage 128 Pro. I'm using the latest drivers. Interesting thing about these drivers is they actually have little buttons you can tick to enable 8-bit palette texture and table fog. So they're right in the drivers. As you can see here, right there, there's table fog support, and that is checked. And then there's use palette-based features. Now, I don't know how it's going to go with this card exactly. The Vogan's Wiki didn't directly reference the Rage 128. I believe the Radeon, or the early Radeons, will support table fog. But you have to go in and do like a registry tweak. It doesn't just work. You have to do like certain tweaks to the registry. So I'm not going to bother to do that with this card. But we'll just see, vanilla how it works. And of course, our first test here is Final Fantasy VII. And yeah, defaulted to software render. It did fail the 8-bit paletted textures test. So it doesn't appear so far that this card supports 8-bit paletted textures. Moving on to Final Fantasy VIII, Direct 3D hardware acceleration is enabled, but as we can see, again, it failed the 8-bit paletted textures. But let's go into the game just to be sure and take a look at the game itself and see visually if we can notice one way or the other. Here we are in the game, so let's pull up the menu. I can already tell from that little spot corner right there, it doesn't look good. And yeah, so obviously it's not using 8-bit paletted textures here. We can see in the background there, it just doesn't blend well. So yeah, it doesn't appear that this card does use the 8-bit paletted textures. As expected, the option does not show up in Forsaken either. So moving on, taking a look at Shadows of the Empire, let's take a look if it will do table fog. So this is our first test to see if it does support table fog. And it does not appear to support table fog at all. As a matter of fact, how you look at the background there, it might give that glitch where that area that's supposed to be shrouded in fog just turns solid blue, like a light blue, but there is no fog to be seen. So yeah, it looks like so far, unfortunately, the Rage 128 does not support 8-bit paletted textures and also does not seem to support table fog either. So that's a double strikeout so far, but we'll see if there's just something going on with this game. We'll give a look at Thief 2. So the sky scene in Thief 2, it does appear that our Rage 128 at least does display the sky correctly in Thief 2, so that is a plus. So far, the only card that hasn't displayed the stars is the GeForce 256. So far, the other three cards have displayed the sky correctly. So I'm quivering in anticipation to see if the Savage 4 can also display it correctly. So let's move on to the fog, and let's see if it can manage to display the fog in Thief 2. So unfortunately, it does worse than just not display the fog. It actually glitches out here. It almost looks like it's trying to create the fog, but it just can't seem to get it right, and so it just like shades, just some of the textures just looks like it has blank textures. So that's actually worse. I'd rather just not display the fog, but it actually just looks weird here. Although I do wonder if maybe the registry tweak that works with the early Radeons would work with the Rage as well. Maybe that's why we're getting this look, but not very good showing from the Rage 128 Pro. Not good at all. So let's move on to the Savage 4. So for the Savage 4 Pro, I am using the latest Diamond drivers. This is a Diamond card. I did try to use the latest reference drivers, and Shadows of the Empire, it gave me a lot of glitches with the latest reference drivers for whatever reason. It was unplayable. So I fell back and I tried using the latest diamond drivers, and they seem to work just fine. Here in the drivers, there's this little direct 3D box with a fog table that you can like click and unclick, which would suggest to me that it certainly supports that. But then again, with our Rage 128, it had little check boxes for fog or table fog, fog table, table fog, whatever, and 8-bit paletted textures, and neither of those seem to work. So who knows? So of course, our first test, let's take a look at Final Fantasy VII and see what it tells us. And I can see right away it's defaulting to software render. Okay, there we go. You can put, so it does appear that it's working. You can select direct 3D hardware acceleration, and it does appear to pass the 8-bit paletted textures test. So that is good. So let's move on to Final Fantasy VIII and see what we get. So Final Fantasy VIII seems to pass the test. Again, 8-bit paletted textures detected, pass, and we have 3D acceleration. So let's take a look at the in-game menu, see if we can see any glitches or weirdness going on. And here we are in the game. So far so good, nothing weird. And yeah, it looks, it's blending as it's supposed to. So I mean, I do see a little kind of glitchy lines up in the upper right hand corner. I'm not sure what that's about. That's not good, but overall, yeah, it does seem like it is, at least it's doing the 8-bit paletted texture, so that part's working, although I don't know about the other little minor glitches I see there. And as you would guess, the 8-bit paletted or 8-bit paletized textures option does indeed show up in Forsaken. Alright, so let's move on and let's see, well, we'll see if it can display those stars in the sky for Thief 2, and we'll see how well it does with table fog or fog table, whatever. Now, Shadows of the Empire seem to give me an overall issue with the Savage 4 card in general. As you can see here, the text is all like goofed up and stuff. I can tell you, like I said earlier, with the reference drivers, the latest reference drivers for the Savage 4, the game was completely unplayable. When I did manage to get into the game, like, it didn't display like any of the enemies or anything. I couldn't do anything. It just basically showed the terrain. When I got rid of those drivers, when I installed the latest Diamond drivers, it was much better. The game was playable, but like all of the FMV scenes and stuff were just screwed up. So let's look at the game itself right here. So let's see if it supports the table fog. It should, but again, it doesn't. We get that same weird like glitch back there, like we did with the ATI Rage 128, except it's like a dark blue. It's like a darker blue. With this card, where the glitch with the Rage card was like a lighter blue, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, either way, it is not displaying the fog effect, unfortunately. So I don't know what's going on there. I do believe I thought this card was supposed to support the fog effect, but it's just not happening. And I did go back to the drivers. I did toggle that little table fog check mark. I tried it on and off, and I had the same effect either way. Will it display the sky correctly in Thief 2? And yes, it does. So the Savage 4 is displaying the starry sky correctly. So of all of the 5 cards we tested, only the GeForce 256 did not display the stars. So it seems that most cards, at least from the time period of the late 90s, early 2000s, seem to be able to display this star effect in Thief 2. Okay, so we got a strikeout with Shadows of the Empire, but that game gave me a lot of weird glitches. So let's see if we get some fog with Thief 2. And no, we don't. There is no fog displayed in the scene. At least it's not glitching like the Rage 128, but there is no fog, which is a bummer. I thought this card was supposed to support fog. Maybe there's a certain driver. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. But a little disappointed with the Savage 4. I thought it would make an okay alternative if you didn't have a Voodoo 3. It's certainly a cheaper card, but it doesn't seem to be able to support the fog effect. Not sure why. Alright, so let's wrap this video up. So that's just a look at some cards, not that many, just 5 cards, that may or may not support 8-bit paletted textures and table fog. Now, this obviously isn't all the video cards from that era. So if you do have a card that you want to know if it supports these things and you can't find concrete information online, just try running some of the tests that we ran in this video to see what's going on there. So what did we learn about 8-bit palette textures and table fog? Well, they don't seem necessary to play the game. For the most part, you can play the game if your card doesn't support these features. Final Fantasy VII aside, although, like I said, there is a patch that you can get that will let you use 3D acceleration, even if your card doesn't support 8-bit paleted textures. So just keep that in mind. But you don't need a card that features these things to play the games. But I have to admit, having the features does add a lot of atmosphere to the games. I didn't really play a lot of Final Fantasy, like 8, for example, just the beginning part. And I mean, the background being a little, like, kind of off isn't that big of a deal. So, you know, you could probably live without 8-bit paleted textures as far as I can see. Table fog, on the other hand, really does add a lot of atmosphere. Shadows of the Empire just looks weird in some of those stages without the fog. And like Thief 2, you know, you really want to be able to, I don't know, you know, you're a thief creeping around these weird Victorian-ish cities. You kind of want fog in a game like that. But again, it's not necessary, but it does seem to add a lot to the atmosphere. So if you are planning to play a game like Thief 2, you probably want to look for a card that supports table fog. I'm going to talk real briefly about Thief 2 as well, with the scene with the sky that we did with each of the cards. Again, I don't think that's 8-bit paleted textures, especially now, but that it's still an interesting test to run. Thankfully, all of our cards were able to display the stars in the sky fine, except for our GeForce 256. Just couldn't do it. It wasn't a driver issue. I tried several different drivers, both old and new, and in between, and it just could not display those stars, so it doesn't seem like a driver issue. So let's talk about these cards. First of all, hands down, our winner here is the Voodoo 3 card. It was just, you know, I don't dislike this card. I want to make that clear. I like this card, but I am trying to find chinks in its armor, and it's just putting up a fight. I'm having a really hard time. I mean, the only thing, you know, it doesn't do 32-bit color. It's not a huge deal, especially if you're running it on something like a Super Socket 7 build or like a slower Pentium 2 or Pentium 3. I mean, if you're running like a Pentium 4 or a faster Pentium 3, you might want a card that supports 32-bit color, but I mean, other than that, this card, I installed the driver, well, I installed the card, I installed the drivers, and that was it. There was no graphical glitches of any kind, no adjustments I had to do. It just worked. And it displayed everything perfectly. Stars in the sky, 8-bit paleted textures, and table fog. No issues. So, hands down, if those features mean a lot to you, and you can pick up a Voodoo 3, do it. It supports everything, plus you get the bonus of Glide games. It supports the Glide API, of course. Next up, looking at the TNT2. Again, this card did a good job. I mean, it did what we knew it would do, and it didn't do what we knew it wouldn't do. So this does table fog just fine. So if you want to play something like Thief 2, Shadows of the Empire, this will do just fine. It does not support 8-bit paleted textures. It's not a big deal. I mean, between the two things, I guess if I had to pick, I'd probably rather have a card that supported table fog, to be honest. Doesn't seem like the 8-bit paleted textures is as much of an issue. GeForce 256, it performed way worse than I thought it would for the features. I mean, theoretically, I guess it should have been, not way worse, but theoretically it should have been on the same level as the Voodoo. It should have been able to do 8-bit paleted textures and table fog just fine. And it kind of did. Table fog was no problem for it. 8-bit paleted textures wasn't a problem for it, although I was getting those weird lines in Final Fantasy VIII. I suppose I could have done more testing with that. It could have been a number of reasons. But again, Voodoo 3 just worked. GeForce issues. Again, the issue with Final Fantasy could be well, with this card in general, again, you're going to get some games like Incoming and that have some issues. So just keep that in mind. And then, again, in Thief 2, there was no stars in the sky. Not a deal breaker, but it does mess up the atmosphere. And in a game like Thief 2, I think the atmosphere is very important. So that might be something you want to consider. Even though it kind of does all those features, it does have some kind of issue. Again, I don't know if Phil said it was like they changed the color coding or something with this card. There's just some games it's just not going to display correctly. Alright, so I guess next up we'll do the Savage 4. This is like the Pro. Yeah, I mean, this card was a little bit disappointing for me. It did 8-bit paletted textures just fine, but it couldn't do table fog. So the Vogan's Wiki said it should be able to do table fog. You know, that's a pretty reputable source. There's some really smart people over at the Vogan's forums, but I could not get this card to do table fog. So I tried, you know, different drivers with it. I actually tried the latest reference drivers, and it broke like Shadows of the Empire. I couldn't even play that game because the terrain appeared, but like none of the enemies and objects appeared. And then I used Diamond's official drivers, the latest ones, and then it worked. But I don't know. I don't know why it didn't display the table fog. Maybe there's a different driver I could use. I don't know. I can tell you that the Voodoo 3 just worked, and this didn't work, at least with table fog. So I was a little disappointed. If you guys know what, maybe I used the wrong drivers or I did something wrong, let me know in the comments. So I guess the biggest disappointment here is the Rage 128. It basically could do nothing. It displayed the stars in the sky fine, but it didn't do our 8-bit paletted textures, and it actually did worse than not displaying the fog. It actually created glitches. So Shadows of the Empire, it didn't display the fog. I suppose you could call that distance where it was a solid color, I suppose you could call that a glitch. But then in Thief 2, with the tower, instead of just showing the tower without the fog, it kind of showed the fog, but it was all messed up. So I don't know. That was pretty disappointing. Now I know the Radeon cards support table fog. Some of the Radeon cards support table fog if you do like a registry tweak, at least the earlier Radeon cards. So maybe I'm supposed to do some kind of registry tweak with this card, and it will allow it to display table fog. I don't know, a little bit of a hassle, but let me know in the comments if you know that this card does do table fog and you have to do some kind of weird registry tweak or whatever. Let us know in the comments. But you know, just for a casual user, just installing the card and installing the drivers, I couldn't get it to do anything, fog or 8-bit. And it's extra strange because, you know, the drivers specifically have buttons that seem to enable table fog and 8-bit paletted textures. I mean, they're specifically in the drivers, and there's a little box, and you can check mark it, and it does absolutely nothing. And I was using the latest reference drivers for the Rage 128. So I don't know. Again, maybe there's different drivers I could use, or I don't know. Let me know in the comments. But I guess the winner of this hands down was the Voodoo 3. Just all around winner. No issues whatsoever. So definitely another recommendation for the Voodoo 3 if you're looking for those kind of features. If you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe. You know, have any comments, criticisms, let me know in the comments. I love constructive criticism. Constructive is the key word there. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.